Title: Come Home With Us. Snow fell like a quiet verdict from the sky, heavy and unforgiving, as her bare feet pressed against the frozen pavement and her arms wrapped around herself in a desperate attempt to survive another minute. Every breath burned her chest, every shiver reminded her how far she had fallen, and yet the deepest pain was not the cold, it was the shame of being seen like this, broken in full daylight. On the other side of the street, a man stood still with 3 children pressed close to him, all 4 staring at her as if they were witnessing a moment that would change their lives forever. That was the instant everything began to shift, even though none of them knew it yet. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of one human moment to change everything, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Kindness Hub Tale, because stories like this remind us who we truly are. She had not planned to be here. No one ever plans for their life to unravel thread by thread until there is nothing left but survival. Once, she had been someone people relied on, someone who laughed easily and believed tomorrow would always be better. But loss has a way of hollowing people out. First came the sudden death that ripped the foundation from her life, then the silence that followed when friends didn't know what to say anymore, and finally the slow descent into choices made out of desperation rather than desire. By the time winter arrived, she had already lost her home, her sense of worth, and the voice inside that used to tell her she mattered. That morning, the storm was worse than usual. Snow whipped sideways through the streets, clinging to her hair and soaking the thin dress she wore like a punishment she felt she deserved. She had wandered without direction, not because she wanted to go somewhere, but because standing still meant feeling everything at once. Her body shook violently, but her mind was numb, floating somewhere between regret and exhaustion. She didn't notice the family at first. She only noticed the warmth of a shop window she passed, the faint glow of light that mocked her from behind glass. The man across the street noticed her immediately. He was the kind of man whose life had already tested him enough to recognize pain when he saw it. His coat was worn but clean, his posture protective as he kept one gloved hand resting on the shoulder of the smallest child. The children were quiet, unusually quiet, their eyes fixed on the woman trembling in the snow. Childhood has an instinct adults often lose, the ability to feel compassion without filtering it through fear or judgment. They didn't see a stranger. They saw someone hurting. The man had not planned to stop either. He had errands to run, responsibilities waiting, a life already heavy with its own challenges. Raising 3 children alone had taught him efficiency, caution, and the discipline of focusing only on what he could control. But something about the woman's posture, the way she curled inward as if trying to disappear, cut through all of that. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the same one he felt years ago when his own world collapsed and strangers had either looked away or reached out. Snow continued to fall as the moment stretched. Cars passed, people hurried by, and no one else stopped. That, perhaps, was the most painful truth of all, that suffering can exist in plain sight and still remain invisible. The woman closed her eyes, her body trembling harder now, tears freezing on her cheeks. She didn't expect help. Expectation had only ever led to disappointment. She expected the day to continue like every other, long and merciless. But the children didn't move on. One of them clutched the man's coat tighter. Another took a hesitant step forward before being gently pulled back. Their silent concern pressed against him until it became unbearable. He realized then that whatever lesson he taught them next would live inside them forever. He could teach them to walk away, or he could teach them what it meant to be human. The decision was not heroic. It was simple and terrifying. It was the decision to care. He crossed the street slowly, aware of how intimidating he might seem, aware of how fragile she looked. The children followed close behind, forming a small, uncertain line against the white blur of the storm. When the woman opened her eyes and saw them, panic flashed across her face. She tried to step back, to shield herself from judgment, but her legs failed her. She braced for disgust, for harsh words, for being told to leave. Instead, she saw concern. Genuine, unguarded concern. Something inside her cracked. Not all the way open, but enough to let a sliver of warmth through. The man stood at a respectful distance, his presence steady, grounded. The children's faces were pale from the cold, their cheeks red, their eyes wide. They didn't look at her with fear. They looked at her as if she mattered. The invitation that followed was simple, almost impossibly so, yet it carried the weight of everything she had lost and everything she might still regain. It wasn't a solution to all her problems. It wasn't a promise of an easy life. It was an offer of safety, of warmth, of being seen. Her first instinct was to refuse. Pride and shame screamed louder than hunger and cold. She had learned to survive by needing nothing from anyone. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat. But her body betrayed her. The shaking worsened, her vision blurred, and she realized with sudden clarity that stubbornness could cost her everything. Survival, she understood in that moment, sometimes means allowing yourself to be saved. The walk that followed felt unreal. Each step away from the street felt like stepping out of one life and into another she didn't recognize. The children stayed close, their small presence strangely reassuring. The man walked beside her, careful not to rush, aware that this was not just a physical journey but an emotional one. Snow continued to fall, but the cold no longer felt quite as sharp. The warmth of the house hit her like a wave. Heat, light, the smell of something simple cooking, these ordinary things overwhelmed her senses. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she felt safe enough to sit down, to stop bracing herself for the next blow. As the door closed behind them, the storm was shut out, at least for a while. Recovery did not happen in a single moment. It was not neat or immediate. The days that followed were filled with quiet struggles, with shame resurfacing in the middle of the night, with the fear that kindness always comes with an expiration date.